1,000 years ago, the tale goes, a religious man, an imam, was set to debate an atheist who did not believe in the existence of a creator. At the prescribed time of the debate, the atheist showed up, but the imam was 3 hours late. When asked about that, he said, "You wouldn't believe what happened. I was stranded on the far side of the river until a violent storm came by, running through the nearby forest. It uprooted all the trees, banged them all together until it chopped them into perfectly sized logs of wood. And then a lightning bolt struck a nearby iron rock, scattering it into pieces of little iron nails. And then great wind blew from the east, lifting up all the wooden logs, aligning them perfectly. And then another great wind blew from the west, lifting those iron nails and blowing them in the direction of those logs, bolting them all together. And lo and behold, a beautiful canoe fell from the sky for me to use, complete with a nice wooden paddle. So I jumped into the canoe, I crossed the river, and I came." At that point, the atheist admonished the imam for mocking him with such an unbelievable story, at which point the imam says, you refuse to believe that a storm running through a forest would create a canoe, yet you believe that all this marvelous life around us was created with no creator. And thus the tale goes, the imam silenced the debater. The argument in this story may have been convincing 1,000 years ago, but atheists of this day and age are not so easily persuaded. They would argue that this fable misses the point entirely, for they do not believe in chance, but rather in the laws of nature that led to the emergence of this life. That it was not an intelligent being that created this life, but rather life emerged from simple laws of nature that favor existence of life over non-life. That this seemingly complex universe and life therein actually emerges and evolves from simple physical laws and biological mechanisms. And the analogy of a canoe being spurred into existence from a storm while amusing is irrelevant. The idea that the atheists of today would discount an argument that was compelling 1,000 years ago raises an interesting question which I posed to an atheist friend. Is the argument for intelligent design getting stronger over the ages or weaker? Would an atheist of today feel more confident about his belief compared to his counterpart 1,000 years ago? Or would believers of today feel more assured of their stance and belief compared to their predecessors? Of course not. Of course, the argument for atheism is getting stronger and stronger, and the argument for intelligent design is getting weaker and weaker, decade after decade. With the advancement of science, we are piecing together the puzzle which is life. And the proof is in the numbers. The fact that the number of atheists around the world is increasing answers your question. Science is progressively dismantling belief in God bit by bit, increasing the comfort and assurance of atheists and sowing more and more doubt with the believers. Look at your own book, the Quran. What evidences does it cite to prove intelligent design? What signs is it talking about? Life on Earth? The theory of evolution explains that to us. The sun, the moon, the stars. Well, the Big Bang explains to us how all those celestial structures came to be. The rivers and the clouds that carrying the rain and the mountains, these simple things may have been marvelous and compelling to those who lived 1,000 years ago. But now we understand these things. We understand that they derive readily from the laws of nature. The world is not fine-tuned to life, but life is fine-tuned to its surroundings. And with the advancement in science, we are doing away with the need for an intelligent agent. God is no longer necessary in the mix to explain this life. And that's a good thing. And may I ask why this is a good thing? Why are you so keen on doing away with God as an explanation for the creation of this universe? Because once you invoke God as the creator, it stops further scientific discourse. Why would I spend time and effort trying to discover the complex natures and mechanisms of life when everything can be explained away by simply saying God created this? Invoking God arrests scientific discourse. It stops it. For a theory to be scientific, it needs to be verifiable, or its predictions need to be verifiable, either now or perhaps sometime in the distant future, but it needs to be able to be verified or falsified. It needs to be falsifiable. Citing God as the creator is not falsifiable, and hence it is not scientific. Your response may seem obvious and compelling, but let us examine it further. It is true that science does provide explanations for many of the creations around us without the need of invoking an intelligent designer. But science has to be taken in its totality. We cannot pick and choose from science. For example, in modern times, we understand the water cycle on Earth, how clouds are formed and how rain falls. Thus, science has demystified this previous mystery. But science presents a new mystery. How did water come to exist on Earth? When it turns out this is a very rare occurrence among planets, one that requires so many conditions to be perfect and so many good fortunes to align. Even scientists concur that Earth has been very fortunate in having this kind of resource, this kind of water abundant on its surface. Now that's a new mystery also presented by science, one that was not appreciated 1,000 years ago. The same goes for oxygen. The existence of oxygen in Earth's atmosphere was always taken for granted 1,000 years ago. But now we know that the existence of oxygen in a planet's atmosphere is a rare occurrence. The existence of an atmosphere at all is a rare occurrence. And that oxygen came to be on this planet only by, and I quote, a delicate dance between biology and geology. And just as science explained to us the creation of mountains by way of tectonic activity, it also told us that tectonic activity is a very rare occurrence on planets, and that it is essential for the emergence of life, and without it there would be no life on Earth. So that's another fortune we are lucky to have, another peculiar coincidence. 1,000 years ago, the moon was miraculous in its beauty and in the light that it reflects. But the advance of science only deepened the miracle and told us that the existence of the moon was essential for the emergence of life. And also told us that the moon came to exist by an incredibly lucky set of events. The most accepted theory for the creation of the moon, the Great Impact Theory, goes like this. A huge celestial body of the size of almost Mars hits a violently spinning, wobbling Earth. The impact is large enough to vaporize the incoming body and a good chunk of the Earth, but not large enough to vaporize Earth entirely or to even to knock it out of its orbit. And then the debris coalesces into an unusually large object that is at just the right distance, just the right size, in order to dampen down the spin of the Earth, stabilize its wobble, and shifts its axis to the ideal 23.5 degrees. That's an incredibly fine-tuned series of events. So after all those years, as far as the sign of the moon is concerned, who feels more reassured of their stance because of the scientific conclusion? The atheist still needs to invoke a great deal of chance and luck in order to explain its existence without a creator. And 1,000 years ago, we did not realize that the sun sends us as much harmful radiation as useful ones, and that we are protected from this deadly radiation only by a magnetic field around our planet, which is a rare occurrence among planets. Another example of science deepening the mystery rather than dispelling it. In a sense, what science gives, it also takes back. The same science that gave us the theory of evolution is the one that stands helpless in explaining how the first cell emerged. Evolution cannot start until you have at least one living cell, complete with its membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus, which includes the DNA. Darwin assumed in one of his letters of the existence of the first cell in a warm little pond, with all the necessary ingredients for the creation of that cell, with all the ammonia, phosphoric salts, light, heat, and electricity. Until this day, scientists embrace this hypothesis, abiogenesis, that the first cell was created chemically, not biologically. The problem is that even with all the right ingredients present, the probability that a small RNA molecule, let alone the more complex DNA molecule, just an RNA molecule forming in the 1 billion years it took for life to start on Earth, the probability of that happening is exceedingly small, to the order of 1 in 10 to the power of 78. That's more atoms than there is in the observable universe. Looking at the sky opens the eye to even more wonders. The stars that seem as chaotic furnaces that emit light and heat are anything but. In fact, they are finely tuned production lines creating the necessary building blocks of life, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, and then spewing them into the universe when they explode. And the creation of carbon is very peculiar, very amazing. Carbon is created by the so-called triple alpha process, where 3 atoms of helium collide with each other to create carbon. This reaction would have been too slow, too ineffective to be useful. Except that it turns out amazingly, carbon possesses a certain energy state, an excited energy state or a resonance that aligns perfectly with the energy of those 3 helium atoms colliding with each other. This makes the process much more efficient and carbon produced in appreciable quantities. Such an incredible coincidence led a prominent scientist called Fred Hoyle to remark that when you observe this process, you cannot help but believe that a super intellect was involved in guiding it. And then some of the carbon fuses with helium atoms to create oxygen. A resonance state of oxygen that aligns with this reaction would have been catastrophic, for it would have eaten up all the carbon, depriving the universe from the basic building block of life. But luckily and peculiarly, the resonance state of oxygen is just short of this catastrophic limit. So within those stars, carbon has a resonance state that aligns perfectly with the 3 colliding helium atoms, and oxygen has a resonance state that is just short of the catastrophic value. And the fine-tuning involved is to the order of 0.5%. How wondrous and peculiar is that? The constants of the universe is another intriguing aspect that screams intelligent design. One example is the so-called fine structure constant, a dimensionless quantity that represents the ratio between the gravitational and electrostatic force between 2 charged particles. Make the fine structure constant a little stronger than it actually is, and the protons will repel so strongly that they will be unable to form a nucleus in an atom. Make it a little weaker than it is, and molecular bonds will be too weak, and we would not have molecules at low temperatures. Richard Feynman, a renowned scientist, remarked at the fine structure constant by saying that it is one of the damn mysteries of physics, and that you can say that the hand of God was involved in writing it, and we do not know how he pushed his pencil. End quote. So are other constants in the universe, such as the mass of the neutron and that of the proton, that is fine-tuned to the order of 0.1%. That's 1 in 1,000. And beyond those limits, there would be no life in the universe. In fact, there would be no atoms even in the universe. Just as the sky was wondrous 1,000 years ago, it is even more so now. The Big Bang Theory explains to us how the universe started, even though we do not know what caused the initial bang, and how the stars, galaxies, and planets formed according to the laws of physics. However, scientists were dumbfounded when confronted with the extreme fine-tuning necessary that they need to invoke in order to explain the so-called horizon problem and flatness problem of the universe. Those two problems were solved, those two predicaments were solved by the modern cosmic inflation theory, a theory which, by the admission of one of its own authors, created a bigger fine-tuning problem than it sought to solve. So there is no scientific explanation for the creation of this universe in the form that it is in, except with the invocation of an extreme level of fine-tuning and an extreme level of chance. But the biggest wonder of all is the so-called cosmological constant, or the energy density of vacuum. We measure the energy density of vacuum to be around 0.5 joules per cubic kilometer. This is an ideal value. If it was a little bit larger than that, then the universe would have expanded so quickly that no planets or stars, not even atoms, would have had the chance to coalesce and form. And if this value was a little smaller than it is, the whole universe would have collapsed on itself into a great big hole before any of the stars or planets would have had any chance to form. It's a very fine-tuned value. The bigger problem here is that it is not in accordance with the scientific conclusion. Quantum field theory would suggest a value that is far greater than the 0.5 joules per cubic kilometer. In fact, it suggests a value that is 120 orders of magnitude larger. That's 10 to the power of 120. An astronomically big value that would have led to the decimation of the universe as soon as the Big Bang occurred. And the only explanation that scientists provide and accept for this is that there must be some dark energy, and that's what it's called, dark energy, that is spread in the universe that negates and nullifies this value that science calculates for the energy density. So imagine an energy density that is massive, and then some dark energy that is present that nullifies that and negates that to a value that is close to zero but not zero. So it negates the vast majority of it, but it leaves a little bit to explain the expansion of the universe. That is an astronomical degree of fine-tuning, 1 in 10 to the power of 120. The degree of luck that you have to assume, or the degree of chance that you have to invoke, is astronomical indeed. In 2002, a group of scientists published a paper titled Disturbing Implications of the Cosmological Constant, in which they discussed the deep paradoxes involved and mentioned the possibility that an intelligent agent intervened in the evolution of the universe. And then they concluded by saying that perhaps the only reasonable conclusion is that we live in a world that does not have a cosmological constant, that it does not exist. Problem is that since then, many scientists around the world have corroborated and confirmed the existence of the cosmological constant, and it is now a unanimously accepted theory. The amount of fine-tuning in the universe is astronomical beyond imagination. A fine-tuning that is not aided by any natural selection. A fine-tuning with no scientific explanation other than chance. No wonder that the example used by so many, some of whom are even atheists, is that of a violent storm passing through a junkyard, creating a 747 jetliner. Isn't it amazing that after 1,000 years, the example stays essentially the same, from a storm passing through a forest creating a canoe to one passing through a junkyard creating a 747. As great as it is, science presents more predicaments than it solves. The choice is not to believe in a creator or in science, but rather the choice is to believe in a creator or to believe in chance. You cannot escape one or the other. Are you aware of the anthropic principle? That life is the way it is because otherwise there would be no one to observe it. So it is natural that this world is suitable for life, even for intelligent life, otherwise you and I would not be sitting here discussing this. Well, does that explain the diversity and beauty of nature? The beautiful colors in nature and the diversity of food sources and so on, those were not necessary for life, right? Or was this also another streak of luck? The anthropic principle is certainly true. If the world was not the way it is, you and I would not be sitting here asking these questions. But that does not make the fine-tuning predicament any less troublesome for an atheist. Imagine I was sentenced to death by firing squad. And imagine there were 10 skilled snipers standing only 10 feet away from me, each shooting at me 100 bullets. And imagine that I happen to escape unscathed. An acceptable application of the anthropic principle would be to say that because I am here asking this question, then surely that I am still alive. Surely I have escaped those 1,000 bullets. But to go a step further and say that therefore there is no mystery, that would be ridiculous. Are you aware of the multiverse? That there are countless number of universes beyond our own? Or there are countless number of universes that came before and will come after our own? If the number is countless, then no matter how remote the chance for life is, if the number is countless, then there is a reasonable chance that life will happen at least once. Your number for the odds of the cosmological constant, 1 in 10 to the power of 120, that's a fantastically small probability. However, if there are 10 to the power of 120 universes out there, then there is a reasonable chance that at least one of them will hit the right number. But on top of that, you have to account for the other fine-tuning in our universe, for the chance that a DNA molecule would emerge in a billion years, and so on, so many other things. Well, then increase the number. Assume that there are more than 10 to the power of 120 universes out there. Multiply it by a billion, multiply it by a zillion. Whatever it takes until you get a reasonable probability that a few of those universes will hit the right notes for this beautiful symphony. In fact, if the number of universes out there is infinite, then the probability of life is finite. In fact, it's almost assured. And there will be potentially a large number of planets that do hold life. Ours is one of them. So can I take this idea a step further? If the number of multiverses is infinite, can we assume that there must be an intelligent form of life as well? Perhaps a form of life that looks just like us? Perhaps people that look just like you and me, leading the same life? I mean, if the probability is so remote, just increase your infinity. Absolutely, that's exactly the point. And is it possible that in one of those universes, there are seas that part, or winged horses, or a person who can walk on water or create wine from water? I don't know about that. Well, why not? Perhaps in one of those universes, the laws of physics allow that, or perhaps allow it in a certain instant in time. I mean, the multiverse is starting to look a lot like religious miracles, don't you think? Let me ask you, is there any kind of scientific evidence on the multiverse? Is it something that we can observe, we can verify? Is it verifiable? Is it falsifiable in any way? Of course not. We are limited only to our universe. In fact, we can observe only a fraction of our universe. So this theory is unscientific speculation. Remember your gripe with religion? That religion arrests the development of scientific discourse? Well, so does the multiverse. That anything can be explained by the invocation of God as a creator, well, anything can be explained by the invocation of the existence of a multiverse. That religion requires blind faith, so does the multiverse. The multiverse is the ultimate resorting to chance. It is the ultimate admission of the role chance plays in the idea that this universe was created without a creator. It is a sign of desperation, a dead end faced by atheists to explain this universe. The multiverse is simply replacing God with chance, simply replacing God with the multiverse. Why are you willing to accept the multiverse, to believe in it, yet so vehemently reject belief in God? Both require blind faith. Well, I can return this question onto you. Why don't you believe in the multiverse? Why do you insist on belief in God? You said that both require blind faith. But faith in God is not blind. I was only trying to make a point, which is that the advance of science has not helped the case for the atheists, but rather complicated it. And that atheists at the end resort to the same kind of blind faith that they purport to criticize. But faith in God is not blind. The multiverse is distant and cold. Our God is warm and present and interactive. He interacts with those who seek Him, who pray to Him, who ask Him. And we can feel His kindness in not only in the existence of life, but in its beauty and diversity. A diversity and beauty that goes far beyond the necessary conditions for life. Chance is cold. God is warm and present and interactive. But I do not feel Him. Try it. Try asking Him for guidance. Try it like you mean it. Try it like you need it. Try it like you're in distress. But be prepared to follow the outcome wherever it leads, the outcome of that prayer, wherever it leads. Well, why wouldn't He just show Himself? Why keep us guessing? That would have been interactive and responsive, wouldn't it? You want Him to reveal Himself literally? Where would the test be? That's the whole point, right? And how would that happen? Would God reveal Himself in the sky? Is it possible that someone would still say that perhaps the formation of clouds and noise created by the winds has created this illusion and still find a way to reject this sign? Our world is different from that of the angels. God created angels who see Him, or at least experience His presence in a much more direct and profound way than we do, and thus they have no doubt in His existence. That is a world of absolute faith and no doubt, a world of worship and submission, but not of a lot of sacrifice or overcoming one's desires for God, for the angels have none. It's a world that is free from sin or challenge to God, and thus God's forgiveness is not shown, nor His wrath. God has revealed Himself to us in the beauty of this life around us, in the moon and sun and stars, in the galaxies and the atoms and particles. And for those with an open heart, in the birds and bees and mountains and clouds and rivers, those things mentioned in the Quran that may seem simple are in fact powerful and compelling and sufficient for those with a humble heart to believe and submit. But for those who are actively seeking a way to deny the existence of God and reject faith in Him, no miracle will be sufficient for them to establish faith, let alone induce submission. So all of this is simply a test? Yes, it is. It is a test. It is just a test because all of this world, despite its marvel and awe and grandeur, is just a small part, a very small part of the world to come in the hereafter. But that's another discussion, a discussion about the day of judgment.